Hey guys, it's good to see you. Glad that you're here tonight. I see we got a good group, and I see faces in the audience that I don't know. And I'm really glad that all you guys showed up. There's a couple things, I guess, matters that we need to take care of beforehand. On my way here tonight, I get a text. And my first cousin, who I thought really liked me a lot, and always thought I liked her, she sends me a text and she says, "Hey, are you going to be at church tonight at Hope?" And I said, "Yeah." Like really fast. I responded really quickly. And then a few minutes rolls by, she sends me another text. She said, "What are you preaching on?" Like that should matter. Well, I tell her what I'm going to preach on. It's silence for the next 15 minutes of the drive. And then all I get is a thumbs up. So I respond, "Are you coming?" Crickets. I am glad to see that she just rolled in back there. I tell you what, she was going to judge, I guess, come tonight on the sermon topic. And then Jerry's sitting here. Here's a guy that I esteem greatly. He looks around. He said, "I just knew Chris Hooten was going to be here tonight based on the crowd." So it's like it just went this way here, like really quickly. And tonight we're going to talk about the River Jordan, and I just feel like it fell right off in the deep end of that thing, you know? Well, I am glad that you're here. I have the topic of the Jordan River. And so I've worked on this backwards and forwards, and I'm going to frame it tonight this way that I think will help you. It's helped me as I've thought about it. All of us, there comes a time when we have to choose to cross the river. There are times in our life that we have to make a stand and we have to go forward. We may choose a reason that we have to. We may have to fight for something. We may have to stand for something. But we all face a river. We have to make a choice. And we're going to find tonight in several places where the Israelites, God's people, had to make a choice on crossing the river. If we were to go back into history, let's say all the way back to December the 25th, 1776, George Washington stands on the edge of the Delaware River. It's December the 25th. It's cold. An ice snowstorm has blown in. He shows up to the river with some 2,400 men. You ever read anything about this time? Most of the men do not have coats. And a few of the guys have shoes, and the rest don't. They have been beaten in one battle after another. The morale is in the tank. This is a bad place to be. And George Washington stands here at the river, and he needs to get to the other side. The men are in the garrison, and he knows that if he can get over there, Hussein's garrison, he very well likely may catch them asleep and take them by surprise. But how do you motivate 2,400 guys who, some of them, their time in service is up? They're getting out. They're cold, they're wet, they're hungry. And you look out across this river at night, and there's ice. I know you can't picture it now because it's 100 degrees outside. But you know when it's cold and you walk out and you breathe and it's like crystals. And 2,400 guys have to get across the river. Because what waits on the other side could be a huge victory. It could be a turn of the war. And he chooses to go. Those men cross the river, and the very next morning they catch the enemy just as they had hoped. And they defeated him. And it's remembered, and the story's told over and over and over again of Washington at the river. We find ourselves so often at the river. It may be that it's a hospital room, and it becomes a place that changes everything. Just a week ago, last Tuesday night, I was telling Jerry and his family Then I got the phone call that my oldest son, Luke, had had a seizure at work just right down the road at Hampton. And the ambulance came and picked him up, and they rushed him to the hospital. And while he's there on the bed, he has another seizure. I make it, and the doctor does a CT scan, and he says, look, we need to get into Little Rock. And so they put him in an ambulance, and off to Baptist we go. For 2 days, I waited for MRI results. I waited for the neurologist to come by, and I could see my life changing. Luckily, there was no tumor. He has, what did I say it was? Epilepsy. I am horrible with diagnosis. Anybody else have that same problem? About 1 million things run through my mind. And so we'll battle seizures from here on out. Maybe it's a hospital room where a moment happened that changed. A church building where someone comes in, they give their life to Christ. And they make the choice to get up and they walk forward. Or they tell the preacher or elder outside that this is the moment. I thought about my grandmother's kitchen table and how many decisions and rivers were crossed, decisions were made at that table. Or a graveside where a funeral was given and a family laments and mourns. But tonight I want to take you to a couple of specific places. The first is Joshua chapter 3. The Israelites have been wandering in the wilderness for some 40 years at this point. Moses has died and gone, and a new generation has risen. And the promised land is fully in sight. The spies have come back, and they said, look, we can surely take this city, but we've got to get across this river. It's a huge problem. In verse, I think 15, 16, it literally says that at this time the river is swollen. It's huge, it's large, it's raging, it's flowing, it's deep. You know, some people are deathly afraid of water. Did you know that? When I go to Walmart, I bump into some of those people. They're afraid of water and soap. But some people are terrified of getting in the water. For God's people to go into the promised land, this huge barrier, it mounts in their mind of this river that terrifies them. And are they going to trust God? Are they going to have faith? Or are they going to stand still? Are they willing to trust God to move forward and go into the promised land? That's the question at hand, isn't it? Washington had this same choice. If he remained on this side of the river, defeated as he has been, he's still safe. There's not a fear of drowning or losing more troops or hypothermia setting in when their little boat's capsized. But he had to face his fear and overcome what was before him, or there would be no victory. The Israelites, in order to go in and take the promised land, had to cross the river. There was no other way around it. I just bet in your life there are obstacles, there are rivers in your life that have to be crossed. And you have to make a decision whether or not you're going to move forward. Thinking back earlier in this book, Joshua stands with his family in chapter 1 and says, look, you know, God has been really good to us. God's been really good to the Israelites as a people. And we have decided, we have made a commitment. We're going to follow the Lord. Do you know today, when you make that commitment, that you're going to follow Jesus, truly follow Jesus, not just in word only, that, yeah, I'm a believer, but one who commits his life to being a kingdom Christian. As Jesus would pray, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That when we pick up the mantle and we say and commit ourselves to following Jesus, there are a lot of difficulties that come with it. The world has shifted quickly, hasn't it? For a long time, we would talk about Christianity, Christians that would have one arm with Jesus and the other arm with the world, and that we try to keep this balance where the world would move so much, but we would try to keep in step. The world has moved. Society, culture has moved so quickly to another side. We're going to have to make decisions, ethical decisions, decisions about morality, and those may really cause us a lot of fear. We could lose our jobs. We could lose our position. We could lose friends. Family members may become upset with us. And so our river lays out before us. Is following God, is it worth crossing the river? Second, we move to Joshua chapter 4. God tells the Israelites, Joshua specifically, that when you cross the river, you're going to pick up a stone, one for each tribe. So there's going to be 12 of these stones. And you're going to carry them with you to the place that I tell you for worship. So out of the river, when God parts it and they walk across on this dry ground, they literally take a stone to remember what God had done for them. Joshua explains this in the text. He says, when your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall tell them. God wanted Israel to remember. Remember. How easy it is for us to forget. You know, when you leave home, I bet you do this. When your kids go to catch the school bus or your grandchildren have been over to your home, when they leave, how many times do you say, I love you? I love you. I love you. And your spouse, you husbands, if you were to refrain for a day, maybe even a couple hours, a week, a month, without telling your wife that you love them, will they become angry? Yeah. Why is it? Why is it that we need to hear from our parents? Children need to hear us. Our spouses need to hear it. We need to hear from our spouses that we love you over and over again. Wouldn't it be enough that the day that we got married, I looked at my wife and said, I love you, and she said, I love you too, and that was enough for the whole marriage? Because we forget. And we have a tendency of forgetting what God has done. Let me tell you how I know that. Because when we get through an obstacle or something happens in our life and we really rely on God and God, we believe, helps us and we get through that, when the next challenge comes, often we revert right back. God's left me again. We go into panic mode. We go into this uncertainty. We go into fear and trepidation. And we forget that God has always been good. Don't we? And we sing songs, remind me, dear Lord, remind me. Peter would say in his letter, stir up your mind by way of pure remembrance. Remember, remember, remember. I had a Bible professor years ago that said, you know, if you took the core teachings out of the Bible, if you just really boiled it down and took the key teachings, you could put them all on an index card. But God tells us those same things over and over and over again, illustrated in people's lives, and story and commandment. Because we forget. We do. We live our life and time elapses and we forget. And so God says, look, I want you to grab these stones out of the river and they're going to be a memorial because people forget. We pray desperately for something, God provides it, we rejoice, and time passes and we're right back in the same place. And it's really ironic to me that we often act like God has never helped us before. I have church members that come to me in a panic, in a tizzy. And it's like, look, God's been good to you. He's been good to you all these years. And helping them think through that and remember. And these stones were to do just that. They were to point backward and say, we've been here before. We've been down this road before. We've crossed this river before. And God has brought us through that too. Let me tell you something that I don't think we do a whole lot of. is we talk to our children about God and say, you must believe in God. You need to read your Bible. But we very seldom, I don't see my folks very much talking to their children about how God has walked with them. We've given them the law without the love and the story behind it. You do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But as parents and grandparents, I think there's a lot of failure to communicate how good God has been to us. So we planned we haven't done this yet because it's a lot of money, but we looked at going to Disney World. And one of the reasons we didn't go is because we talked to people about their experience at Disney World. Where did you park? Where did you eat? How far did you have to walk? How long did you stand in line? Were there plenty of places to eat? The list goes on and on. I want to know, did you like it? How was it? What would you do over again? But it seems in our fellowship for so long, it was like, you just grab the Bible and you look at the book, chapter, and verse, and you roll with it. And we've divorced ourselves from the story of how God has worked and loved us. And the River Jordan is one of those rocks, those landmarks within history where we can look back and see that God used it in unbelievable ways. And so the rocks are for a story that God worked here in the Jordan River. And we need to remember as well that God has answered our prayers. And He may not have answered it the way that we had hoped or wanted. But have you ever found yourself thanking God for unanswered prayers? I found myself just recently. I'd prayed for something. I'd prayed for it for 3 or 4 years, and it didn't come to fruition. And there was a part of me, I'm just going to be very honest. There was a part of me that was like, why is God holding back? Why wouldn't God allow this? This is a good thing. This would draw me closer to God. Why wouldn't God allow this? And some things happened that brought it home that God knew way better than I did. And often we forget that God is in control of this. Psalm 77 and verse 11. I remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. Often our faith going forward is strengthened by what God has done yesterday. I often tell my folks this, that Romans clearly says in chapter 8 that God's Spirit lives within us and dwells within us. And I get this question a lot. If God's Spirit is within us, how do you know? Are you doing miraculous things? And the way that I look at this is looking backwards. I can see in my life where God has helped me, where God was there. It wasn't me by myself. It was God's Spirit and God's Word living within me. There's no way that I could have. But at the moment, I wouldn't have known. It's in hindsight. It's kind of like the footsteps in the sand. It's looking back and going, wow, how did we get here? That's how often that I'm able to measure and see God's goodness and His good deeds. Because at the moment, I may be blinded. I'm in this storm of hurting or loss or suffering, or maybe I'm in a point of ignorance on some things. But looking backwards, I go, God was there with me through that. And the stones are simply as a reminder to tell how good God is. As George Washington got to the river, that was one of the most defining memories of the Revolution, that he took his stand. And for Israel, it's a deliberate stance that we've crossed the river, and we as a people, individually and collectively, trusted God, even to cross this horrible river. And some crossings should never be forgotten. The next story comes in 2 Kings chapter 2. Elisha and Elijah come to the river. We have mentor and mentee. They're going along. They get to the river. Elijah takes the cloak off his neck. He slaps the water, and the waters part. They go a little ways down the road, and a chariot and a whirlwind comes and picks up Elijah. And what is left? The cloak. Elisha picks up the cloak and begins to walk back home. And when he gets to the river, he slaps the river. Verse 14, this is what Elisha says. Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? And the waters parted. Elisha discovers something that is important for us today. Elijah may be gone, but God didn't leave. Have you ever noticed that when a preacher leaves, that sometimes your attendance drops and people get upset? When people change or leave the church, people get upset. When you have elders that step up or step down or resign or whatever it may be, people get upset and leave. We base our faith in God and our faithfulness often on other people. You ever notice that? Elijah comes to the river Jordan and he slaps it and he says, where's the Lord? Where is the God of Elijah? And God never left. We have to be able to stand on our own faith, that I trust in God and I believe in Him. People will let us down. People will encourage us. But we have to follow God. I see too many people that get caught up on somebody. Well, where are they at? Well, they're not here. Well, I guess I'm not coming back. Or they got upset. Well, I don't know why they got upset, but if they're upset, I'm upset. God is still faithful regardless. And I think that's an important lesson that comes right out of the River Jordan. You know, it's like the text in Hebrews 13:8. Jesus is the same today, is the same He was yesterday, and forever. Let me tell you, as raise your children, and you know this in your grandchildren, your kids can only go so far on your own faith. They can only go so far. And if something were to happen to you, would they be faithful to God? God is still there. He's still there. We have to pass on to our kids a faith that belongs to them. That no matter what happens at church, no matter what happens to you, they're going to be faithful. Psalms 154 and verse 4. One generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. Our responsibility isn't to build big churches and leave them for the next generation, or leave money or programs or whatever. We ought to be in the business of instilling our faith and leaving our faith. I couldn't help but to think about this the last week or two as I was preparing for tonight. Seeing my grandmother here every summer that I preached. She was here every summer. I don't know that I ever preached anywhere that my grandma didn't come. And her faith, I lived on her faith for a lot of my years. But her faith was more than just following me. She was very hard about this. You read and study and you develop your own faith. Let me move quickly because time's running out on me here. Your next one is probably the most popular, is Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman hears about the Jehovah God of Israel. There's a servant girl, a slave that has been taken from Israel. Naaman has leprosy, and she says, hey, the God of Israel can heal you. He gets his servants together, he gets all of his animals and money and clothing, and he makes a trip. When he gets to Elisha, he expects Elisha to do some miraculous working. And Elisha says to him, go dip 7 times in the river Jordan and you'll become clean. Well, he scoffs at this. That river, I got cleaner rivers at home. Now, you know that story. Now, let me tell you a funny story. This is really, really true. I was deer hunting once. You know how we travel around and hunt. And it was a Wednesday. And I said, you know what? The Lord's been good to me. I'm getting to go hunting. I better get on up there to church. So I go. Well, the preacher is over there talking about this text. And he says the Jordan River is a dirty river. Have you ever been to the Jordan River? Anybody ever been to the Jordan River? Oh, I've been there. I've been from where it starts, it comes up out of the grave, all the way down to the end. I've been there, top to bottom. So he made a big deal. I mean, it was like a 30-minute point on the dirtiness of the Jordan River. Now look, you probably know me. I don't like to talk a whole lot. This is kind of my spot one time a week on Sunday morning or whatever, and I tried to be quiet. Well, at some point, I just had to ask. Stuck my little hand in there, and I said, when you say it's dirty and polluted, like, what do you mean? Is there like, whatchamacallit, candy bar wrappers floating in the rivers, or Coke bottles, old hubcaps? Do you know the guy never thought about it? He never thought what could have made the river dirty. It's not a dirty river. All Naaman is saying is that the rivers back home are cleaner. You ever seen the river's muddy, right? It's the silt that it picks up. But this guy, I guess, literally thought, because he was like stunned that somebody would question him on the dirtiness of the river. I guess he thought there was Coke cans floating in that thing, though. It's a really pretty river. I'll tell you another funny story. They have churches that go and schools that go. And one of the schools, I'm not going to mention the name of it, they had like 2 big school bus loads. And they jumped off in the river. Well, Lebanon's right there. And one side of the river is controlled. And when those guys got out there and started baptizing one another, they started shooting into the water. And them buses went to loading up in a hurry. Let me end this point real quick. When you come to Naaman, what you have is Naaman wants it done his way. When we come to our rivers in life, often we want to do it our way. And God is saying, are you going to do it yours, or are you going to follow me with all of your heart? Because often I want it just my way. Don't you? We're going to face rivers in our life, and they're going to be frightening, and they're going to be scary, and some of them it may be self-induced that we put ourselves in a situation that we have to cross it. Others may be that we're just towing the line, that I'm going to be faithful to God, and I don't want any trouble. I don't want to have to run into this tailwater. I don't want to have to make a crossing. But being faithful to God means I have to. And am I going to choose to trust God, or am I going to shrink back? That's what the Jordan says to me. Am I going to remember the goodness of God and let my faith waver? Or am I going to move forward? Thank you, guys.